That's right, fans. Welcome in another episode of the Two Line Pass podcast. With me, as always, I've got Ryan, Dustin, and I'm Brandon, here to bring you another player profile episode. Today's player profile episode is a twofer because in free agency, we made one of the biggest splashes in free agency, we will say, and we got two defensemen who are extremely talented and one who is extremely high profile, and it really put Utah in the spotlight of free agency. So today's player profile, we are going to profile Mikhail Sergachev and John Marino. Sergachev, you may have already seen this, came from Tampa Bay, and all we had to give up was a little guy named J.J. Moser and a little guy named Connor Geekie. Couple draft picks thrown in there for good measure, but we shored up the defense for years to come. He was only 1 year into an 8-year contract with Tampa Bay when we got to Utah. And so I'm super excited to talk about Mikhail Sergachev. I know Ryan, I know Dustin, you guys are excited to talk about it. Dustin, I want to hear from you first. Let's hear where he came from, and other than the trade, where's he been before Utah?
Okay, so he is one of the first players that I've seen on our roster that's actually from Russia, a land of great hockey, who breed some of the best hockey players, arguably the best hockey player to ever play the game. But yeah, he's from Russia. He was drafted in the 2016 NHL draft, ninth overall. And then he spent some time kind of bouncing between the Montreal Canadiens and the Windsor Spitfires. He stayed with them for a season before he was traded to the Tampa Bay Lightning, where he really made a name for himself, became one of the probably top 10, 15 defenders in the league. And one of the most important things that will apply to his time here in Utah, he won the Stanley Cup in back-to-back seasons. So he is a well-traveled, well-championed defenseman, which is something this team desperately needed. We've talked about that more than a couple of times on this podcast. But yeah, that is where he's from and the road that he's taken to get here. I'm not going to go too in depth into this one, since I believe we're going to try and squeeze two players into this one, but that is where Sergachev comes from.
Now, Dustin, he had some interesting comments too. A little bit of clickbaity headlines came out of it too. Run us through the comments that were made almost directly following the trade.
Yeah, so it was one of those, like, he wasn't a name necessarily that was mixed in along with the like trade rumors. Going into trade season and off season, you kind of hear about some names, some contracts that the teams might want to move, some guys that are kind of getting towards the end of their careers that teams might want to move away from, as they have young guys coming up through the minors, and that they want to get some more time on the ice. But he was not one of those that really expected to be moved. So the trade came as a bit of a shock to him. And afterwards, obviously, he's asked for comment. He said he was in shock. I didn't expect it. Talking to my agent, talking to some players, and talking to Clayton Keller of the Utah hockey team, everybody said great things about Utah and the new franchise. It's pretty amazing, honestly, the whole setup, the city. I'm very excited. It's a big opportunity for me to prove myself. Being a leader, I'm looking forward to it, which is something that he hasn't had to do with his time in Tampa Bay when he was there. But it's something that he's probably going to have to do here. Arizona last year, they didn't have a captain on their roster, and we've talked about that and gotten into some heated debates on Twitter/X with I shouldn't say X fans, because some of them might follow the team up north, but with some Arizona fans over who we said may become a captain. But he is the type of player who has the experience to be a captain. So I'm not going to say that he will be, because he's so new to the team. He's new to some of these players. Obviously, they all know each other from playing against each other in the league. But he's the type of player who's probably going to have to, if he doesn't have a C on his sweater, he's probably going to have to at least step into somewhat of a leader slash captain type role with this roster.
For sure. And depending on what coach's philosophy is, if he wants to continue doing the captain by committee type thing, even if he doesn't have a letter on his jersey, he might still be able to give that leadership role, that cup winning experience. And yeah, you mentioned he caught off guard by the trade. Going into year 2 of an 8-year deal. You don't expect to be traded when you sign an 8-year deal, but I do believe his no trade clause would have kicked in a few days had he not been traded at the time he was. We are extremely fortunate to have him, and I think he's arguably one of the best defensemen in recent memory. And if you're looking at the defense core of Arizona, certainly since Oliver Ekman-Larsson. But Ryan, why don't you break it down? Why we're so excited? Because what are the fans going to see when he steps on the ice in October?
So, what fans can expect out of Sergachev is last year his numbers are a little kind of terrible, but he only played 34 games coming off of a knee injury. And then a lot of fans, if you did watch last year's playoffs, will remember him attempting to come back during the playoffs and he played terrible, but he was hurt. Now we got him on a full summer. But so through 450 career games, he's got 250 points. He's a plus 47, and I don't care what anybody wants to say. I think plus minus is important, or at least I feel like for a defenseman, your plus minus is important. And if you're coming off back-to-back Stanley Cup champions, I don't care who you are. We'll take that all day, every day. But he does everything, and he's an old school kind of defenseman in the way that he's 6'3", 219 pounds of just mean Russian talent. He's got a bomb from the point on the power play. He can skate way better than you expect a man of his size to be able to skate. He can throw checks. He'll get more assists than he will goals, but that doesn't mean he's not going to get 10 goals or more. I'll take a defenseman getting us 10 goals anytime. I don't care if they're on the power play or whatever. But he also kills penalties regularly and effectively. He can do it all, basically. And then the only thing that I would say the fans maybe a hesitation is how is he going to play without Victor Hedman? Because, yeah, he's coming from Tampa Bay where him and Victor Hedman were the guys. And a lot of people try to say Victor Hedman was the better of the two. Offensively, yeah, sure. And he logged more minutes. But Sergachev has proven himself time in and time out. And I think getting that separation away from Victor Hedman and the Tampa Bay team will give him more space to, you know what I mean? Like, he gets to be the guy. So he gets to go out and he knows it's not all on his back, but a big portion, like the team is going to be relying on him. And that's probably, you're right, the main reason they brought him over is you got 2 Stanley Cup champions. You're getting a C on your jersey. I'll call it now. Name somebody else who deserves it. You can't. At least the Hedman's got 2 Stanley Cups. Like, no, I don't know. Whatever you whispered, Randon, no. But so what I would expect from Sergachev is it might be a little rocky in the beginning, but you can expect that for probably most of the guys coming into a new environment, new fans, new team. Well, not new team, but a lot of new players. But hey, we got our defense figured out, and that was my only real concern going into the offseason. And boy, did we do it right. Like, by far the biggest trade of the free agency, and it was completely ignored by a lot of the news outlet or the other sports pages that I've noticed. A lot of them didn't really talk about it. So
their loss is our gain, and we'll talk about it. It really did set the tone for how Utah is going to approach the franchise in terms of kind of talked about the difference between, going into free agency and trying to nab every available free agent versus a draft and develop. And speaking of the merits of draft and develop, the 2 guys we gave up for Sergachev are very big potential big upside guys. JJ Moser obviously had shown that he was capable of being at the very least a second defenseman pairing type defenseman, and is likely as his career goes on, he's going to be a number one defenseman. He's much younger as relative term, because Sergachev's only like 26 years old, which we talked about is the prime in an NHL career. You get into the mid to late 20s, early 30s. That's the prime, and we've got him for his prime with us. And so it was really, I think, obviously talent for talent right now, we came out ahead. And then there was some speculation in terms of who we gave up in Connor Geekie, who was a center who did not play in the NHL, has still not played at the NHL level. He's a very flashy player in the minor leagues, but he has not played in the NHL yet. He was drafted the same first round as Logan Cooley, who played an entire season. So obviously he's not that level of superstar, but potentially he is. Obviously Tampa Bay, they were getting rid of Steven Stamkos, which we know now, and they need to make room for less paid potential future centers. Both sides won, which doesn't always happen in the trades. I think both sides got what they wanted, and I still think we came out a little bit ahead. And not for nothing, JJ Moser's currently in salary arbitration, and so he and Tampa Bay obviously are not that close on what they think he's worth money-wise. So maybe there was some sort of conversation had. Maybe he tipped his hand, and Bill Armstrong said, guess what? I don't want to deal with it. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know if anything like that happened. But there was reports that Bill Armstrong had planted the seed that he was interested in Sergachev weeks before it actually happened. So great move by Bill Armstrong, and really put us on the map in terms of free agency, but really solidified the defenseman, because he's going to be our first pairing defenseman. He's going to play on the power play, and he's probably going to play on the penalty kill and penalty kill one. He averaged just under 24 minutes last season and the last couple seasons, even with his leg injury, which obviously we're going to assume that he's healthy coming up in this season. If he is, he's definitely going to be on the power play one. He's definitely going to be the first line defenseman and be the big name defenseman that we're looking for. Ryan, you touched on it. Man, he's got a powerful shot, right? Like, I talk about like shot speed and being like, I wish our forwards did that. But guess what? We got a blue line just power hitter. Shoots it almost as hard as any defenseman in the league. He's gotten over 100 miles per hour, and he shoots the puck very, very hard. And he's a puck moving defenseman in terms of he's going to get you assists. 64 points 2 years ago. We're going to ignore even though his point pace was pretty good before he got injured, but the year before, just really putting himself on the map in terms of a playmaking. He doesn't need to score 50 goals. He's just going to create those opportunities. And he skates a lot, right? He's moving between offense, neutral zone, and the defensive zone, and continuing to move the puck. And so his conditioning is off the charts. Like I said, we've got him in his prime athleticism. So I think we've got ourselves a great number one defenseman, probably going to be paired along Durzi. I would assume it would be our number one defensive pairing, but we'll see as the year goes on, and just hopefully that his leg is 100% healthy, because he did rush it. It was a nasty leg injury. He came back really quickly. Maybe wasn't as effective as he could because but that's player in him, right? That's the dedication to get back in there and play. So I'm super excited to see him on the ice. He's another one of those, if you want a jersey, if you want a lead pipe lock in terms of a jersey that's safe to buy, you get Sergachev's jersey, and you're gonna be sitting pretty and be right there. So before we move on to talk about our next big defensive acquisition, Dustin, Ryan, anything you guys want to talk about of Sergachev before we move on to John?
One last thing for you guys out there who watched hockey in the late 2000s, early 2010 decade-ish. He reminds me a lot of Shea Weber. Maybe not as big as Shea Weber, but he's got that same all-around style defense and a goddamn cannon from the point.
And I was just gonna clarify. I believe earlier you had mentioned he's 2 years into an 8-year contract, so he's got 6 years left on the contract that he brings over to Utah, right? Okay, that's all I wanted to clear up. I feel good about it. I feel very, very good about this trade.
Just north of $8 million a year for a very solid, very reliable defenseman. So especially like we said, we had none. So as far as making moves to get somebody to anchor that defense, and we do have we have 3 very good young defensemen who will continue to grow and be helped along by the veteran presence of Sergachev, and they'll also be helped along by the presence of another who's sure to be, well, not sure, but likely to be the second line defenseman, John Marino. And let's talk about where he came from, how he got here. Dustin, why don't you give us the breakdown?
Okay, so John is 21 years old. He was born and raised in Easton, Massachusetts. Grew up. He actually was born. He believed he was sets of twin brothers who were born very big. They were both over 7 pounds when they were big, and the doctors thought that it might leave them with like conditions later on in life. And the Boston Children's Hospital suggested that their parents enroll them into hockey lessons because the form needed to skate could help strengthen their legs. So he may be in the NHL strictly just because he was a large baby. But yeah, he grew up playing hockey. He went to Harvard, I believe it was, is where he played his collegiate hockey. He was drafted 154th overall in the 2015 draft, which is a bit of an outlier, sort of like the baseball, like the Major League Baseball draft. A lot of these guys that get drafted later in the draft in some of the deeper rounds, they never make it to the NHL level. Like they just they travel around playing in the ECHL and in the minors, and they maybe they get up and like have a cup of coffee in the NHL, but usually they don't make any long lasting careers getting drafted that late. But he was drafted by the Edmonton Oilers, and then went to the Pittsburgh Penguins, and then he went from the Penguins and was traded to the New Jersey Devils, where he's played the past couple of seasons. His offensive game has improved both of the last 2 seasons, but he would say himself that it has been a little inconsistent. But that is how he's taken his road to get all the way from Easton, Massachusetts to Salt Lake City, Utah.
Well, he's a big baby boy, and now he's going to be a big, solid, strong defenseman for us. Based on his weight, a little undersized now, but not everybody needs to be 6'3", 215 to be a high quality defenseman in this league. So it's no longer required to be that bruiser type. And you mentioned, Dustin, about how he was a late round. He's one of those guys where you look at it and you say, man, that was a really good, what a steal, what a diamond in the rough they got, which, you've got plenty of first round draft picks over the last 10 years who haven't played a full season, let alone 5 seasons in the NHL. And so to get a guy in round 6 to play 5 NHL seasons so far is a rare treat indeed, and is going to be fantastic for us. Ryan, do you have what the fans might be able to expect out of John coming to play defense for us?
Yeah. So he's got a career 300 NHL games, 328. He's got 107 points, and he's a plus 38. I like that. And he's another guy who's averaging around 20 minutes of ice time a game. So, like you were saying, he's not the biggest guy, but he's not small by any means. You know, he might have been a big baby, but he probably averaged out at 6'1", 180, which that's pretty good. But what I like about him is that he's still young. Like him and Sergachev are both probably hitting their primes together, which I think is going to work out good for us. Yeah, it's basic. I mean, I'm going to be honest. I didn't do a whole lot of research on him. I don't watch New Jersey. Still haven't forgiven them from Boo and Jiggy back in 2003. So, but yeah, he seems good. I haven't read any reports of him being bad or anything like that. He's another solid defenseman, and that's really what we needed to like fix up the team, and bringing him and Sergachev, and especially bringing him from New Jersey, where he had an absolute god-awful season last year, like the rest of the New Jersey Devils did. You know, I'm excited to give him a new place, let him have a fresh start, and if it doesn't work out, doesn't work out. Yeah, I don't know. My bad. I didn't really research him. I'm a bad fan.
Never apologize. Everybody's going to get to watch and learn as you go. I think one of the things to watch with him, and obviously he's not highlighted in this, but with Ian Cole coming in, so that's 3 veteran defensemen, right, that have been around the game of hockey for multiple seasons. And that goes along with Jersey, who's obviously going to be a number 1. But then you've got Kesselring and Valimaki are 2 very young, up-and-coming defensemen that Utah features very prominently, along with Lamoureux, Maverick Lamoureux, and Simashev, right, who are still probably another year or 2 away. So we've got a lot of up-and-coming defensemen in the roster, and it's these veteran guys who are going to basically lay the defensive foundation to bring those rookies up. So it's going to be interesting to see who pairs with who. I think it'll probably be Valimaki and Marino as our second line defenseman, and then Ian Cole and Kesselring as our third line defenseman. We'll find out for sure what the actual pairings are as we get closer. But either way, I think what you see out of John is somebody who's been around the league, who's been around multiple organizations, who will be able to provide some guidance and stability to those younger guys who have really only known instability, which is, I mean, I hate to keep harping on it, like, right, like that's not my goal, is to keep ragging on their cord, man, but there was a lot of instability for many years in Arizona, and so a lot of these guys, these younger guys, are coming into a time where this might be, even though it's moving, which seems like it might be the biggest factor in terms of being unstable, they're moving to something that's absolutely stability. And so to have guys on the blue line anchoring that, that's what you need. And that's the kind of the unsung leadership role that I think they're going to fill in. Both John and Mikhail are both going to step into, whether they have a C or an A or not. I think you're going to see them rise to the occasion and become those leaders. So I'm excited to have them on board. I'm excited to continue to see how this team develops. Excited to see who else maybe we add, maybe we don't add. We'll see. But speaking of Mikhail Sergachev or John Marino, is there anything, Ryan or Dustin, that you guys want to bring up, or in general, before we throw it to the outro of this particular player profile episode?
You know, I will ask, obviously, Sergachev is coming in. He's one of the top 10, 15 defensemen in the league. He's obviously going to be first-line defenseman. Where do you see Marino falling? Is he's I don't see him as like the counterpart to that first-line defense. Do you see him falling in behind there, like the second or maybe third line? He's more of like an experienced guy that you have down the bench who's just adding some depth to the defense that this team is needed. Or where do you think he falls in terms of the line that he actually winds up on?
So I think if I was the coach, I wouldn't if I have to put him and if I have to put Sergachev and Marino together, I'm not going to be opposed to it, but I would prefer to split them up just so I can have I mean, Dursey, he's pretty good and he's still pretty young. I think he's probably going to be that number one guy to go with Sergachev. I think the contract extension he got kind of showed him, hey, we believe in you a little bit. We're going to try this out with you. And then let Marino take the second line because he still got 300 NHL games. That's not anything to scoff at or hang your hat on. But having him with a rookie gives that rookie just a little bit of a netting to kind of play with. The rookies, they can make more mistakes if they're not paired together, if they're kind of paired with a veteran like that who's backing them up. And then we all know Ian Cole will be anchoring that third pairing, but I think he knows that. He's got to know that, and he probably welcomes that because we don't need Ian Cole out there for 20 minutes a game at 35 years old. He's already got 2 cups. He doesn't really even need to be here if he didn't want to, kind of thing. So I think it'll be Marino on the second one. And then we might see Dursey and him kind of flip-flop, like during a game maybe, you know what I mean? Or on the penalty kill. But I would split them up if preferable, just like how Edmonton... I'm not comparing the players here. I'm comparing a situation. Kind of like when Edmonton has to have Draisaitl and McDavid together. Yeah, it's good, but if you could have them separated and still contribute, that's the better scenario.
Absolutely. I think the one thing you don't want to see is you probably don't want to see is John Marino and Ian Cole on that third line together. I don't think that's a good sign for anybody. And it's just, I think it's less Marino. I think it's who pairs with Marino on the second line. Is it Kesselringer? Is it Valimaki? Is going to be interesting to see. And maybe coach plays with those defensive players, because I do believe that we have our number one in Dursey and Sergachev. Now, that being said, the Arizona former beat writer for the Arizona Coyotes did disagree with those pairings and thought that John Marino would be on the first line with Sergachev. I don't agree with that, but so there is some people who believe that Marino is a first line defenseman, and so we'll see if but he's not. It's not like Dursey's not an 18-year-old rookie. He's 25 years old himself, so he's not. It's not like you're letting him be some first time in the NHL rookie playing on that first line with Sergachev. So I think it's in the bag that John Marino is our second line defenseman, and obviously I think there's no doubt, barring a significant injury which will take him out of the lineup entirely, Sergachev is most definitely on the number one pairing. Well, we'll find out who is with who and more as we continue to learn about this team and continue to see the roster evolve. We here at the Two Line Pass podcast will continue to bring you player profile episodes, continue to introduce you to the guys, continue to talk about what we think's going on, and we are inching closer and closer and closer to that season start. Just a few months away, and we're going to get through this summer together, guys. We're going to get through the summer together till preseason starts. But thanks so much for listening to the player profile episode today, introducing our new acquisitions, our free agent acquisitions, and Mikhail Sergachev and John Marino. Guys, I'm Randon for Ryan and Dustin. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.